My name is Dmitri Volkov, and before the war I was just a peasant from the frozen fields of Ukraine. I was born in 1918 in a small village called Krasnoye, where the horizons stretched endlessly and golden wheat danced with the wind like waves of a terrestrial sea. My family had worked the same land for generations. My grandfather, my father, and now me, following ancestral footsteps with calloused hands and a simple heart. My hands knew the plow, not the trigger. My eyes were accustomed to distinguishing ripe wheat from green, to predicting storms by the color of clouds, to finding the way home even on the darkest nights. My wife, Katya, was like a wildflower that grew among stones, beautiful, resilient, full of life. We had 2 small children, Mikhail, 5 years old, with curious eyes that shone like stars, and Anya, only 3, who laughed like church bells on Sunday mornings. I was good with a rifle, that's true. Since childhood, my father taught me to hunt. Dmitri, he would say, a man who can feed his family with 1 bullet is worth more than 10 who waste ammunition. During the long winter nights, I would go out to hunt wolves that threatened our livestock. I learned to track, to breathe, to wait. I learned that patience is a hunter's greatest virtue. But hunting wolves is different from hunting men. That I didn't know yet. The war came to us like a summer storm, sudden, violent, devastating. It was June 1941 when we saw the first German planes cutting through the blue sky like messenger crows of death. Then came the tanks, roaring like steel dragons, crushing everything in their path. Our small, peaceful village meant nothing to them, just an obstacle to be removed. I remember the day I lost everything as if it were yesterday. It was a warm July morning. The sun shining golden over the wheat fields almost ready for harvest. I was in the field when I heard the screams. I ran home, but it was too late. The German soldiers had arrived first. I found my house in flames, Katya and the children. No, I won't describe what I saw. No, I won't describe what I saw. Some images are too sacred to be shared, even decades later. Suffice it to say that at that moment, the peasant Dmitri Volkov died along with my family, and something much darker was born in his place. I buried them with my own hands in the land they loved. I made 3 simple wooden crosses, and swore over their graves that every bullet I fired would be a prayer for their souls, every German death a small revenge for the injustice imposed upon us. When I joined the Red Army in August 1941, I was just another refugee with a thirst for vengeance. There were thousands like me, men who had lost everything, who had nothing to lose except their own lives. The sergeant who recruited me looked at my calloused hands and broad shoulders and said, "Another good soldier for the infantry." But when they gave me the shooting test, something changed. My first shot hit the center of the target at 200 meters. The second too, and the third, the instructor, a Civil War veteran named Petrov, stopped and looked at me with renewed interest. "Where are you from, peasant?" he asked. "Krasnoye, sir, Kharkiv province." "And what did you do there?" "I hunted wolves, sir, to protect the livestock." Petrov nodded slowly. "Wolves are smart, dangerous. You need to be patient to hunt wolves." "Yes, sir." "Sir, well, now you're going to hunt 2-legged wolves, and these are much more dangerous." Thus began my transformation. They sent me to special sniper training in Tula. There, I learned that my natural ability was rare. Most soldiers shoot by instinct, by fear, by desperation. But I shot with the cold calm that comes from solitary nights waiting for wolves on the frozen steppes. The chief instructor, Major Zaitsev, was a small, thin man with hawk eyes. He taught me the secrets of precision shooting, how to calculate distance, how to compensate for wind, how to control breathing. But more importantly, he taught me to think like a predator. "A sniper is not an ordinary soldier," he would say. "You are a hunter. Your job is not just to kill, it's to terrorize. Every shot of yours must make the enemy look over their shoulder. Every death must be a message. You are not safe, not even your best." For 3 months I trained until my fingers bled. I learned to assemble and disassemble my Mosin-Nagant rifle with my eyes closed. I learned to move like a shadow, to blend with the landscape, to shoot and disappear before anyone knew where the shot came from. But what they couldn't teach me was the hunger, the thirst for revenge that burned in my chest like burning coal. That came from Krasnoy, from my family's graves, from the promise I made over their burial sites. My first mission was on the outskirts of Moscow, during the German offensive of autumn 1941. It was October, and the cold was already beginning to bite like wolf teeth. I was positioned in a birch forest, camouflaged among the golden leaves, when I saw my first target. A German officer, tall and proud, walked among his troops as if he were invincible. Through my scope, I could see the decorations on his chest, the confident smile on his lips. He was talking to his subordinates, probably planning more destruction, more death. I adjusted my scope. 400 meters. Light wind from the east. I took a deep breath, held it, and squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed through the forest like thunder. The officer fell like a rag doll, and his troops scattered in panic, searching for an enemy who had already disappeared among the trees. That night, in my diary, I wrote, "First payment of the debt." Many more to come. In the following months, my reputation grew silently. I moved like a ghost through the front lines, appearing where least expected, eliminating valuable targets and disappearing into the mist. My count grew, 10, 20, 30. Each death was meticulously recorded, each shot a small revenge. But it was in Stalingrad that my legend was truly born. Stalingrad in the winter of 1942 was not a city. It was a nightmare made of stone and steel. Every building was a fortress, every street a battlefield, every corner a possible death trap. Snow mixed with ashes, cold cut like blades, and the smell of death hung over everything like an invisible cloak. I arrived there in November, when the battle had already lasted months. My mission was simple: eliminate German officers and sow terror among enemy troops. But Stalingrad was different from all other battlefields. Here, the war was personal. Every meter of land cost blood. Every building was disputed floor by floor, room by room. I established my base in a destroyed factory on the banks of the Volga. From the 10th floor, which miraculously was still standing, I had a panoramic view of the city in ruins. During the day, I observed German movements through my binoculars. At night, I moved through the ruins like a ghost, changing position, looking for new shooting nests. My first week in Stalingrad yielded 12 confirmed kills. Officers, sergeants, German snipers, all fell to my scope. But it was in the second week that something changed. I was positioned on top of a destroyed grain silo when I saw a group of German soldiers discussing around a map. Through my scope, I could see they were high-ranking officers. A perfect opportunity. I adjusted my scope for what appeared to be the commander, a tall man with a scar on his face. But the moment I was about to squeeze the trigger, something made me hesitate. A primitive instinct, perhaps, or the feeling that I was being watched. Slowly, I moved my eyes away from the scope and swept the horizon. That's when I saw him. 300 meters away, on top of a bombed building, there was an almost invisible silhouette. If I weren't trained to see what others don't see, I would never have noticed him. But there he was, another sniper with his scope pointed directly at me. For a moment that seemed like an eternity, we stayed like that. Two predators studying each other, calculating, waiting. My hand moved slowly toward the trigger, but I stopped. Something told me he was doing the same thing. Then, slowly, he lowered his rifle. It wasn't surrender. It was recognition. He knew I had seen him. It wasn't the moment for our duel. Not yet. When I looked again at where the German officers were, they had already dispersed. My opportunity had passed. But something much more important had happened. I had found my true enemy. That night, in the bunker I shared with other Soviet snipers, I heard rumors about my mysterious adversary. Sergei, a Leningrad veteran, was the one who told me the story. They call him the Angel of Death, he said, cleaning his rifle with precise movements. Oberst Heinrich Müller. They say he's killed more than 200 of us. Veteran of the France campaign, Wehrmacht hero, has a personal decoration from Hitler himself. How did he get here? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. They said he volunteered. He wanted to come to Stalingrad specifically to hunt Soviet snipers. Seems like our reputation is bothering the Germans. Sergei looked at me with his tired eyes. Be careful, Dmitri. This one is not like the others. Müller is a professional. I just need to be patient to find his. But inside, I knew Sergei was right. Müller was different. I could feel it in the way he moved, in the discipline with which he had refused the easy shot earlier. He wasn't just a soldier. He was an artist of death, just as I was becoming. In the following days, we began a deadly game of human chess through the ruins of Stalingrad. He killed my comrades. I killed his. Every movement was calculated, every position a possible trap. The entire city seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see who would come out alive from this silent duel. Müller was cunning. He never used the same position twice, never followed a predictable pattern. But I had grown up hunting wolves, and wolves are the most intelligent predators that exist. I began to study his methods, to look for clues in the places where he shot. I discovered that he preferred elevated positions with multiple escape routes, that he liked to shoot just after dawn, when the light was changing and it was harder to locate him, that he always left small marks. An empty coffee cup, a half-smoked cigarette, as if he were provoking me. For 2 weeks we danced this deadly dance. There were moments when we were so close that I could sense his presence, like one wolf scenting another. We slept with one eye open, ate with our rifles beside us. The tension was so dense you could cut it with a knife. It was then that I intercepted the German radio conversation. It was a cold December morning when my radio operator, Pavel, called me to listen to an interception. My German was basic, learned hastily during the first months of war through interrogations and captured documents. But I understood enough to make my blood boil. Herr Oberst, said a voice I recognized as the German regional commander. How much longer will it take to eliminate this Soviet sniper? The answer came in a cold, precise voice. Müller's voice. He is more skilled than expected, Herr General. But it's only a matter of time. Time is what we don't have, the general replied, clearly irritated. Berlin is pressing for results. Our troops are nervous. Every day he remains alive is another day of humiliation for the Reich. There was a pause, and then the general continued with a voice full of contempt. Müller, you are the best sniper we have. How can you be having difficulties with a simple Soviet peasant? Müller responded with his always controlled voice. Herr General, he is not an ordinary peasant. His tactics are nonsense. The general interrupted him. He is just a Soviet peasant. A guy who before the war probably could barely read. Müller, you have until tomorrow at sunset to resolve this, or I'll find someone who can. Peasant. The word echoed in my mind like a gunshot. They saw me as inferior, as if my humble origin were a weakness, as if the fact that I had grown up working the land with my own hands made me less dangerous, less intelligent, less worthy of respect. At that moment, something changed inside me. It was no longer just about revenge for my family. It was no longer just about serving the motherland. It was about proving they were wrong. It was about showing that a simple Soviet peasant could defeat the best the Reich had to offer. I spent the rest of the day planning. I studied every map of Stalingrad I could find. I analyzed every position Müller had used. I looked for patterns I might have missed. And slowly, a plan began to form. Müller was proud that I had noticed. He signed his work like an artist, leaving small clues to provoke me. This pride would be his weakness. If I could make him come to me on terrain of my choosing, I would have the advantage. That night, I began to prepare my trap. I carefully chose the location, a 5-story apartment building that had been bombed, leaving only the concrete structure. From the 4th floor, I would have a clear view of the main square, a location I knew Müller frequented. But the genius of my trap wasn't in the position. It was in the bait. I spent the night preparing a snow dummy dressed in my uniform and equipped with a fake rifle. I positioned it on the 3rd floor in the most obvious window where any sniper would look first. It was a crude bait, but not to deceive Müller. It was to insult him. I also left other deliberately obvious signs. Footprints in the snow leading to the building, a half-smoked cigarette on the stairs, Even an empty food can on the second floor. Everything very evident, very amateur. The message was clear. I'm just a stupid peasant who doesn't know how to hide his tracks. Then I positioned myself on the 5th floor, in a position that was almost impossible to see from street level. But that gave me a perfect view of all of Müller's possible shooting positions. And I waited. Waiting is the hardest part of being a sniper. It's not just the physical tension of remaining motionless for hours, but the mental pressure of maintaining absolute concentration. Any moment of distraction can be fatal. Any hasty movement can reveal your position. But I had learned to wait by hunting wolves on the frozen steppes. I had spent entire nights motionless in the snow, waiting for a wolf to appear. This had taught me something that no military training could teach. True patience comes from absolute necessity. 3 hours passed. 4, 5. My muscles screamed. My eyes watered from the cold. But I remained motionless like a statue of ice. Then finally I saw him. Müller emerged from the shadows of the building across like a shadow himself. Even from far away, I could see the precision of his movements, the economy of gestures that characterized a true professional. He didn't run toward my building. He was too smart for that. Instead, he began to circle, looking for a position that would give him a clear view of the 3rd floor, where my dummy was positioned. For a moment, I felt a pang of respect for my enemy. Even believing I was just a stupid peasant, he was still being cautious, still treating the situation with the professionalism that had kept him alive for so long. This almost made me hesitate. Almost. Müller finally positioned himself behind a pile of rubble that gave him a perfect view of the 3rd floor. Through my scope, I could see him adjusting his own scope, calculating distance and wind. He was totally concentrated on his false target, completely unaware that he had become the real target. My crosshairs found his head. My finger curved around the trigger. For a moment, everything was perfectly aligned. The culmination of weeks of deadly hunting, the moment I had been waiting for. But then, something made me hesitate. Maybe it was respect for a worthy enemy. Maybe it was the desire to see him recognize who really was his executioner. Or maybe it was simply the need for him to know that he hadn't been killed by a simple Soviet peasant, but by a man who had become much more than that. I moved my crosshairs a few inches down, aiming at his chest. It wasn't to spare him. A chest shot would be equally lethal. It was to give him a few extra seconds, a few final moments of consciousness, to understand what had happened. I took a deep breath, held it, and squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed through the dead city like thunder. The sound reverberated between the destroyed buildings, carrying with it the weight of weeks of tension, of a duel that had captured the imagination of all the soldiers in Stalingrad. Müller staggered. The bullet had hit him in the chest, piercing his lungs but avoiding his heart. He had maybe a minute or two before death took him. Slowly, with the willpower that only a true soldier possesses, he turned and looked up. Our eyes met across the distance. Even mortally wounded, even knowing his seconds were numbered, Müller managed to smile. It wasn't a smile of defeat or bitterness. It was the smile of a soldier recognizing another soldier. It was the smile of a man who had finally found someone better than him. Slowly, with great effort, he raised his right hand and made a military salute. Not for the Reich, not for Hitler, but for me. It was his final recognition that he had been defeated not by luck, not by cheating, but by superior skill. I returned the salute, even being enemies, even after everything that had happened. In that final moment there was mutual respect. Two soldiers who had met on the most brutal battlefield in human history and had tested each other to the limits. Then Müller fell. The angel of death had finally found his rest. When I descended from the building, carefully avoiding the German patrols that were running toward the sound of the shot, I found German soldiers already around Müller's body, hidden among the rubble. I could hear their conversations. "Mein Gott," one of them whispered. "Müller is dead. Impossible," said another. Müller was invincible. Who could have done this? An older sergeant knelt beside the body, examining the wound. "Perfect shot," he murmured with something that sounded like reluctant admiration. "Whoever did this is a true master." It was then that I heard the voice I recognized from the radio, The German commander who had called me just a Soviet peasant. His voice was full of disbelief and something that might have been fear. It must have been luck, he said. But his voice trembled. Or maybe he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Everyone knew what he was thinking. Maybe the simple Soviet peasant was more dangerous than anyone had imagined. In the following days, my legend grew. News of Müller's death spread through the city like fire. German soldiers began to speak in whispers about the ghost of Stalingrad, a Soviet sniper who had defeated the Reichsbest. Some said I was immortal, others that I could see through walls. All were afraid, but more importantly, the news reached Berlin. We intercepted German communications talking about the humiliation of Müller's death. Hitler supposedly had entered a terrible rage when he learned that his personal sniper had been killed by a Soviet soldier. For me, that was the real victory. Not only had I avenged my family and served the motherland, but I had proven that a peasant from the Ukrainian fields could rise up and face the best the world had to offer. But glory has a price, and mine was paid in blood and sleepless nights. In the following months, my reputation grew even more. They sent me to other fronts, Kursk, Kharkov, finally Berlin itself. My final count reached 342 confirmed Germans, each one carefully recorded, each one a small revenge for my dead family. I received medals, decorations, promotions. I became a hero of the Soviet Union. My photo appeared in newspapers and propaganda posters. Small children played at being the ghost of Stalingrad. But all this glory seemed empty compared to the weight I carried. Because killing a man, even an enemy, leaves a mark on the soul. And killing 342 men, well, some marks never completely heal. I remember every face, every final moment. Not just Müller, but all the others. The young German soldier who screamed "Mutter" before dying, the veteran officer who tried to drag a wounded comrade to safety, the inexperienced sniper who shook so much he couldn't make a clean shot. All of them had families. All had dreams. All had a life before the war, just like me. The difference was that I survived to carry the weight of their deaths. When the war ended in May 1945, I was in Berlin, watching the city in ruins from the top of the Reichstag. We had won. The 1,000-year Reich had lasted only 12. Hitler was dead. His generals captured or fled, his troops scattered like leaves in the wind. But looking at the destruction around me, it was hard to feel anything but emptiness. Yes, we had won. Yes, justice had triumphed, but at what cost? When I finally returned to Ukraine, I found a different world. Krasnoye had been rebuilt, but it was no longer the same. The church where I married Katya had been destroyed. The school where Mikhail should have studied was now a memorial. The field where I played as a child was full of crosses. I tried to resume my life as a peasant. I received a farm from the government as a reward for my service. I planted wheat, raised cattle, tried to find peace in the familiar routine of the fields. But some things can't be undone. Some transformations are permanent. At nights, when the wind blew strong through the wheat fields, I could hear the echo of gunshots. Not just my shot that killed Müller, but all the others. 342 echoes that followed me like ghosts. I married again eventually. A widow named Olga who had lost her husband at Kursk. We had children, built a life together. But she always knew that a part of me had stayed in the war. That the man who returned from the battlefields was not the same man who had left. Decades passed. The Soviet Union became a superpower, then collapsed. New wars were fought. New heroes emerged. But from time to time, especially during the anniversaries of the Battle of Stalingrad, journalists and historians would seek me out. They wanted to hear about the duel with Müller. They wanted details about tactics, about strategy, about the moment of the shot. But I always felt they were missing the main point. Mr. Volkov, a young journalist, asked me a few years ago, "What was the secret of your success as a sniper?" I thought for a long time before answering. There was no secret. I said finally, "Just necessity. Necessity, yes. When you lose everything that matters, when they call you just a peasant and you need to prove them wrong, you find strengths you didn't know you had." He continued asking technical questions, but I knew he wasn't really listening. He wanted a magic formula, a secret technique he could put in his article. He didn't want to understand that there was no magic involved, just an ordinary man pushed beyond his limits. The war taught me that titles and origins don't define a man. What defines him is what he does when everything seems lost. When the world collapses around you and you have to choose between giving up or fighting. Müller was a professional soldier, trained in the best military academies, decorated by the highest authorities. I was just a peasant who had learned to hunt wolves. But when we met in that final duel, none of that mattered. What mattered was who wanted victory more, who was willing to pay the higher price. And I proved it. Oh, how I proved it. Until today, when the wind blows strong through the wheat fields, I can still hear the echo of that shot. And sometimes, on the coldest nights, I can still see the smile of respect in Müller's eyes. The recognition that a Soviet peasant had become something much more dangerous than anyone could imagine. The war is over. The battles are won. The heroes are buried. But the lesson remains. Never underestimate a man who has nothing left to lose. Never dismiss someone as just a peasant when you don't know what fire burns in their heart. Because sometimes the greatest warriors come not from palaces or academies, but from the simple fields where wheat grows and wolves howl in the night. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who started with nothing and therefore has everything to prove. He's just a Soviet peasant. That's what the German commander said before I eliminated their best sniper. Those words echo in my memory even now, decades later. They were wrong. I wasn't just a peasant. I was a man who had been forged in the fires of loss and tempered in the crucible of war, and that made all the difference.